The big moment is finally here. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is all set to reveal details of the Jamal Khashoggi murder case. He is set to speak in the Turkish parliament. He had promised that today, when he addresses the parliament, he will give a detailed account of the events that led to Jamal Khashoggi's murder. These are live visuals coming to you straight from the parliament in Istanbul, where Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is set to speak any moment now. The full details of Turkey's investigation will come out when the President takes the mic. This, even as CIA's director, American Intelligence Agency, CIA's director Gina Haspel has joined the Turkish authorities' investigations into the murder. Pressure building on Saudi Arabia. Keep in mind, pro-government media in Turkey have been consistently leaking details related to the murder case. Anonymous details from anonymous sources. And today, it will be the man himself, the man at the helm of the Turkish administration, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who will present Turkey's official version of what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, how was he murdered, all the details that Turkish authorities have collected, details which are yet to be revealed so far. That was the promise of Erdogan as far as today's speech in the parliament goes. These are live visuals, ladies and gentlemen, of the Turkish parliament inside the capital, Istanbul, which is gathered for this all-important speech by the president. And now Erdogan is leaving his seat to take the mic. He will start speaking any moment. Ladies and gentlemen, listen in closely to what he has to say. This is Erdogan directly piling on the pressure on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and on Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, which has been happening over the last couple of weeks. Turkey was quick to react to news of Khashoggi's disappearance, and now Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is taking the stage to let the world know what exactly happened in the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul.
My beloved nation, my distinguished friends, members of parliament, esteemed guests, I would like to welcome each and every one of you. I do hope and pray that our parliamentary group meeting will be beneficial for our party, for our nation, for our country. Last week, indeed, was a beautiful week. We had beautiful visits. We went to Moldova as a first stop. In Moldova, we met with the President Dodon and the Prime Minister, and then the chairman of the political party of the Prime Minister, and then many other officials, of course. We held very fruitful meetings with all of them. For us, the Gökoğuz locality is a part and parcel of the country, and there we met with our kinsmen. We had beautiful exchanges with them. We attended different events, and there was a town hall meeting of about 15,000 people that was mostly composed of our kinsmen. And we had the opportunity of doing the inaugural ceremonies of many projects which we built, and these are gifts from the Turkish nation to our relatives, to our kinsmen living over there. A while ago we also visited Hungary, and we came back with beautiful memories of that visit. As you know, There is the Gül Baba shrine, the Gül Baba holy place, which was restored, which was rebuilt, if you will, brought back to its glory days, in a sense. So wherever we go in the Balkans and in Eastern Europe, wherever we go in this part of the world, we are always met with heartfelt emotions and greetings of the people living there. And as we have always said, our physical boundaries are one thing, but the boundaries of our heart, or the influence area of our hearts, are something else. And with our friends, with our brothers and sisters, with our kinsmen who are within the latter of these boundaries, well, our relations with them, we are now bringing these relations back up to their desired level after many centuries, after a very long time. And when we take a step, our interlocutors take 3-5 steps towards us, and this goes to show that they also harbor the same affection, the same positive feelings for us. And I do hope and believe that this contact will get closer and closer, and with our friends we will continue to build a safe and prosperous future together. On Friday I was in Izmir, on Saturday in Diyarbakir, and on Sunday in Istanbul. I attended a number of different events, came together with our citizens, we had fruitful exchanges, and in Izmir we actually did the inaugural ceremony for the Star Refinery, which is a very critical piece of investment for our country. The Azerbaijani state oil company SOCAR invested $6.3 billion in the Star Refinery, and now it's up and functioning in our country. Now, when you look at it as a whole, this brings Azerbaijani investment in Turkey, or it represents rather an investment of $10 billion, including all of its aspects and different components. So with my dear brother Ilham, we were together at the opening ceremony, and I do hope and wish that this investment will be beneficial for Turkey and Azerbaijan. Of course, this actually is one of the biggest oil facilities, oil refineries in all of Europe, the Middle East and North Africa, and with this facility our current account deficit will actually shrink by $1.5 billion. We will be looking at 214,000 barrels per day and a total of 10 million crude oil per year, and we are also looking at 1.6 million cubic meters of storage space. Diesel, naphthalene, jet fuel and LPG and similar other oil and petroleum products will be produced in this refinery. And for their support in making this investment a reality, I would like to go ahead and thank once again my dear brother, Mr. Aliyev, the President of Azerbaijan, on a personal note and on behalf of my nation. So this facility, as you know, it's a long story, of course. At the beginning of it all, we had a privatization which made the transfer to Azerbaijan possible, and then a harbor was also built in the following phases. Also at the same area, more or less, we have wind energy turbines and facilities built. So it's a great facility all in all. On Saturday, we were in our new stadium, city stadium of 33,000 people. We had a youth festival, we had athletes and young people from the city. We had teams of politicians versus athletes, and the match, the game, if you will, the starting kick, I did the starting kick myself. And on the same day, we met with our Diyarbakir organization of our political party, as well as representatives of NGOs. On Sunday, I was in Istanbul, initially for the inauguration of the new HQ premises of the Turkish Youth Foundation, TÜVGA, and we met with young people, and that was followed by our meeting with Prime Minister Hun Sen of Cambodia. That actually was the first visit of that level from Cambodia to our country. And then we had the ceremony for the opening of the second phase of Üsküdar to Çekmeköy metro line, which consists of 9.5 kilometers and 7 stations. That is between Ümraniye and Çekmeköy. So these investments of ours to solve the transportation problems in Istanbul will continue without a break. And at the ceremony for this metro line, we had about 20,000 people. That was indeed a scene, that was indeed a sight to behold. And of course, we will not stop, we will not leave it at there, and by the end of March 2019 we will be continuing the series of opening ceremonies, if you will. So each of these cities that I've just listed are of symbolic value for our country, and of course this is also a picture of unity, of togetherness, of solidarity of our nation coming together and taking ownership of their fate and future. And I would like to now go ahead and extend my gratitude to my citizens in all 3 cities I've mentioned for their hospitality and for warmly welcoming us. Dear friends, now in this part of our parliamentary group meeting, I would like to go ahead and talk about the fate of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who now we know for certain was murdered in the consulate of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul. And I will try and be thorough in my assessment of what happened. First of all, I would like to honor the memory of the late Jamal Khashoggi. May his soul rest in peace, and I extend my condolences to his fiancée, to his family, to his friends, to the people of Saudi Arabia, of which he was a citizen, and to the media world in general. Now, let's do a refresh of our memory, if you will, as regards what has happened. Jamal Khashoggi, for the first time, on the 28th of September, Friday, at 11:50, goes into the chief consulate of Saudi Arabia in Istanbul for marriage related reasons. And it is now understood that this visit of Khashoggi was actually the information was given to the team that planned and executed the murder of the journalist. So that was the beginning of that planning phase. And some consulate officials actually left for their countries in a haste, and this points in the direction that some preparation work was indeed done. On October 1st at 16:30, a day before the operation, Monday that is, at 4:30 in the afternoon, a team of 3 comes to Istanbul through a scheduled flight, a commercial flight. They go to a hotel first and then to the consulate. So in the meantime, another team of people from the consulate go on an exploration mission to the Belgrade forest and to the city of Yalova. On the 2nd of October at 1:45 a.m., a team of 3 people again took a scheduled flight to Istanbul and went to their hotel. A third team of 9 people, including generals, took a private plane, landed at the airport, and went to another hotel for the night. So overall, the team we're looking at is a total of 15 people. And this team of people, from 9:50 to 11 a.m., they come in different groups to the consulate and meet there. The first thing they do is to remove the hard disk in the camera system of the consulate. And in the meantime, Jamal Khashoggi was telephoned at 11:50 to confirm his appointment on that day. On the same day, at early hours, Khashoggi comes from London to Istanbul and enters on foot into the consular building at 13:08. The fiancée was with him at that point in time, and after that point in time, no information was obtained from him, no news of him came out. At 17:15 that day, in the evening hours, the fiancée, Mr. Khashoggi's fiancée, resorts to the official authorities of our country, telling the authorities that Mr. Khashoggi was being held at the consular building against his will and that something bad might have happened to him. Upon which the relevant units of the Directorate General of the Turkish National Police in Istanbul start the investigation. They have a look at the security cameras, examine the footage, and it becomes certain at that point in time that Mr. Khashoggi indeed did not leave the consular building. And of course, as per the Vienna Convention, they have diplomatic immunity, but of course now that's also being discussed. Ms. Mogherini also made a statement about this point, so this Vienna Convention will probably need to be discussed and revised. So, due to this diplomatic immunity, initially no concrete step was taken vis-à-vis the building and the officials of the consulate. So the Turkish National Police and our intelligence start looking into the matter in depth, and the office of the Istanbul Chief Public Prosecutor appoints an acting prosecutor, and they initiate the investigation. Of course, as more in-depth information is collected, things start getting interesting. First of all, starting from the day prior to the day of the murder, different planes were taken by a total of 15 Saudi safety, intelligence and forensics experts who came to our country. 6 of this team leave on October 2nd at 1820. 7 of them leave on the same day at 22:50, taking private planes. And also another person who was given the impression or the look of Mr. Cemal Khashoggi with his outfit, with his glasses and the beard. This individual and the individual accompanying him also took a scheduled flight after midnight to Riyadh. And on the day of the incident, the personnel working at the consulate and the residents were gathered together, and the explanation given to them was that there was an inspection going on. Then they were let go that day. They were asked to leave. So the administration of Saudi Arabia first rejected the claims on October 4th that Khashoggi was killed, and the chief consulate officer actually invites on October 6th a correspondent of Reuters inside the consular building, and he opens and closes doors of cupboards, the utility panes, and different areas of the consular office. But of course that was done in a manner that was far from being serious. But in the meantime, our national police, our intelligence services, our prosecution services continue to concentrate on their investigations to obtain new information and documentation. And our Ministry of Foreign Affairs also was in constant communication with their counterparts to discuss the issue and to share information. On October 11, there was a group of special representatives who came to our country from Saudi Arabia, and different contacts were made with them. And of course, after the matter being kept on the agenda by our community, by our press community, by the global media focusing on this issue, the consular services allowed the consular premises to be searched. Of course, dear friends, we have to ask certain questions and find answers to these questions, because this incident happened in Istanbul, and we have, as a result, responsibility. So we, as people of responsibility, we have the right to ask these questions. As things start to clarify, of course, other countries started taking action. And at every opportunity, of course, we've made it clear that we will not remain silent in the face of this murder, and that we will take every step required by our conscience and by the law. On top of that, of course, we had to wait for the end of the examinations and the investigations so that we would not falsely incriminate anyone. His Excellency, the King of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdulaziz, the custodian of the 2 holy mosques, we had a phone conversation with him for the first time on the 14th of October, and I explained to him the present situation in light of the information we had at that point in time. And during this telephone conversation, I actually explained to him the talks we had with the special delegation of representatives he had previously sent, and I informed him of our joint decision to have a joint investigative group, and we had an agreement on the fact that this would be the path to follow. Upon the instructions of the king, teams from the prosecution service and from our Turkish National Police went into the consular premises and did some examination. Of course, before that it was not allowed by the consular officials, and when that first team of representatives came and talked to me, I explained certain things to this team of representatives as to how insufficient and incompetent this the consul was, and I conveyed the same message to His Excellency the King as well. So after that conversation, the following day, the Consul General was removed from his position. In the meantime, the Consul General, while he was in Istanbul, had to go back to his country. He left. So there was another round of examinations in the consular premises on the 18th of October. On the 19th of October, that is to say 17 days after the murder, the Saudi administration officially admitted that Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside the consular premises, inside the consular building. In the statement from the administration, it was mentioned that Khashoggi died during a brawl that erupted in the building. On the same day, in later hours of the day, I had another phone conversation with the king, Salman bin Abdulaziz. He told me that after the acknowledgement of the murder, 18 people who were implicated were arrested. That was the information he provided to me. And the individuals on the list that was provided to our country, well, we found out that they were the same names as determined by our security and national intelligence services. So this team of 15 people plus 3 others. These 3 others were already consular officials. So, of course, this development is important in the sense that the murder was officially acknowledged and accepted. On the 21st of October, I had a comprehensive phone conversation with President Trump of the United States of America. And we had an agreement that the incident needs to be clarified in all of its aspects. Of course, as the government of Turkey, as the state of Turkey, we have handled this whole process in compliance with the seriousness of these state matters and affairs, international law and the legislation of our country. Despite this being the case, of course, certain media outlets conducted a campaign in order to blame our country and implicate our country and to shift focus, shift the attention of the people. And we know full well who was behind this campaign and what their purpose was. Of course, these attempts to assassinate the nature of seriousness that our country has shown has not kept us from fully investigating what has happened. Well, before everything, this murder, yes, was indeed committed in the Saudi consular building, which is considered as Saudi soil. But one must not forget that that area is within the boundaries of the Republic of Turkey. Also, the Vienna Convention and other rules of international law do not allow the investigation of such a vicious murder to be prevented by resorting to the shield of diplomatic immunity. Of course, we will investigate this murder which was committed inside our country in all of its aspects. We will look into it and we will do whatever is necessary. On the other hand, of course, Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi national, but on top of that, he was a world-renowned journalist. And this, of course, gives us an international responsibility. On top of her own sovereignty rights, Turkey will be persistent in the follow-up of this incident on behalf of the international community and as a representative of the joint conscience of mankind. The information and the evidence that we have so far collected indicate that Jamal Khashoggi was slain in a vicious, violent murder. Whitewashing such barbarity will, of course, injure and wound the conscience of all humanity. And we are, of course, looking forward to the same sensitivity being demonstrated by the administration of Saudi Arabia and all other parties to this affair. Dear friends, the Saudi Arabian administration took an important step by acknowledging and admitting the murder. And now our expectation from them going forward is that all those responsible from the highest degree, highest level to the lowest level will be highlighted, will be brought to justice, and will get the punishment they deserve. And there are indeed strong signs that the incident was not a momentary issue or a momentary result of something that erupted on site, but rather the result of a planned operation. And of course, in light of the existing information, the following questions still are relevant. So all 15 people who have backgrounds that are in one way or another connected to what happened or what was planned, why was this team of people assembled in Istanbul on that day, on the day of the murder? Who gave the instruction to these individuals to come to Istanbul? We're looking for an answer to this question as well. Why was the consular premises not opened to examinations on that day or the following day, but many days later? We need an answer to this. Now, as it is now clear, of course, there was a murder, and it was clear from the beginning. Then why was there a slurry of incoherent statements? And now there is official acknowledgement that there was a murder. Where is the body? Why do we still not have the body? If the information that the body was given to a local cooperator, co-conspirator, and this is information by an authority, by the way. Now my question is, who is this local co-conspirator? Because it's not an ordinary person mentioning this local co-conspirator, it is a person of authority from Saudi Arabia who made that statement. So you have to reveal the identity of this local co-conspirator. You will do this. Before these questions are answered, no one should have the faintest idea that what happened will be covered up. So, there is, of course, some additional information that is now being assessed by our security and intelligence services, but of course that information also points to the fact that the incident was pre-planned, premeditated. As the examination of these bits of pieces of information is complete, it will, of course, make its way into the official investigation filed by the prosecution services. Of course, we cannot put the blame on a number of security or intelligence officials for such an incident. It will not satisfy either us or the international community. And the international conscience will only be satisfied when everyone is held accountable, the executors and the persons or the people who gave the instruction. Personally, I do not doubt the sincerity of His Excellency the King Salman bin Abdulaziz, custodian of the two holy mosques. However, it is very, very important that there is a truly impartial and just delegation that does the investigation, looking into what has happened. And since this is a political murder, if there are other people or circles implicated in other countries, they have to be included in that investigation as well. This is the requirement of international law, Islamic law, and I also believe that a requirement of the law of the land of Saudi Arabia. As Turkey, we will continue to follow up on this matter, and whatever is required by our own laws and international law, we will make sure that those steps are taken. Also, let me make a call here today. Here's the call. This is a call to His Excellency the King of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdulaziz, custodian of the two holy mosques, and of course the senior officials of the administration. Now, this incident took place in Istanbul. Therefore, this team of 15 plus 3, 18 people, their trials, I'm proposing that their trials be held in Istanbul. Of course, it's their prerogative, it's their appreciation, but this is my recommendation, this is my suggestion, because this is where the incident happened. Dear friends, another subject on our agenda is the developments around the discussions on an amnesty and the issue of national oath that are recent. Now, as you know, with the 15th of July, Turkey entered into a new era in many matters, including political alliances and cooperation. And this cooperation environment and atmosphere contributed a great deal to the success of our fight against terrorist organizations in our country. Now, in the process of switching over to this new system, along with the MHP, the Nationalist Movement Party, we have been involved in a very efficient alliance, first in the parliament, and then in the referendum of the 16th of April, and then finally in the elections on the 24th of June. Of course, the nation itself made this alliance, the People's Alliance, possible. As the executive levels of our political parties, we listened to the voice of our nation, and we engaged ourselves in a sincere solidarity. Of course, being in an alliance on fundamental matters, such as the construction of the new administrative system, does not require the two parties to be on the same line on every matter. Of course, AK Party and the MHP, the Nationalist Movement Party, are two separate political parties with their own policies. Of course, we act jointly in matters of agreement, but in matters of disagreement, we are following our own specific paths. Over the recent period with the MHP, we have had differences of opinion in such matters as a potential amnesty, the national oath, the early retirement, and the decision of the Council of State. Now, due to the importance we attach to the People's Alliance, we have tried as much as that has been possible to use...
All right, that is, of course, the Turkish leader Erdogan, Recep Erdogan there, talking in Ankara on the big story of the week and the month. That is, of course, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. He has reiterated several points already made by the Turkish government in the last couple of days or so. But most importantly, he said that we cannot blame security officials who have been held responsible by the Saudi Arabian government already. We must know who the instructions came from, that we need to be satisfied, including the international community, of who these people really were. And only then will this trial be fair. He also said that the trials of the murderers must be held in Istanbul. Also said that he has spoken several times with the Crown Prince as well as the King of Saudi Arabia on what was the line of investigation that was being taken in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. He reiterated several times that it indeed was a murder that took place in the Saudi Arabian consulate. He also said that I spoke to President Donald Trump, who said we must get to the bottom of this, and that this incident must be clarified completely by the Saudi Arabian government. He said that the international community was supporting the Turkish government in this attempt to find the truth about who exactly was responsible for these 18-odd people who undertook this brutal murder of Jamal Khashoggi. There was a lot of clapping from inside the Turkish parliament when Erdogan was speaking. He has been speaking for over half an hour now. He said that he first spoke to the King of Saudi Arabia on October 18th and that the King agreed to a joint inspection. He said that the incompetent Consul General of the Saudi Arabian embassy, or the consulate rather, was also removed, and that they finally agreed to a round of examination of the embassy after a cleanup was already done. That came 17 days after the murder took place. Why was it that the Turkish authorities were allowed inside the consulate only after 17 days of the murder? And this is when, of course, they officially admitted that the murder indeed had happened inside the consulate.
Drug lords.
And joining us to talk a little bit more about this speech that the Turkish President Erdogan has given right now is Onur Erim, who is a political analyst who joins us from Istanbul. Onur Erim, thanks very much for talking to us this afternoon. Your first thoughts on the speech by the Turkish President. He says very importantly that even though the Saudi Arabian embassy, has sort of falls under the Vienna Convention, it doesn't allow any shield to it because of the murder that's taken place. Onur, can you hear me? This is we're here from the Delhi studio. We've just been listening to the Turkish president there speak, announcing several important issues. And what was your big takeaway from what the president had to say?
I believe there was two major points. One is that President Erdogan clearly said that there is substantial evidence to the fact that this was a pre-planned massacre. And that he will not be the world will not be satisfied just by taking 18 people under custody. That there should be a higher up through the chain of politics in Saudi Arabia. There's got to be people responsible in higher levels, and the world should not or will not rest until these guys come out as well. And also, he said that there is suspicions that there may be other people or other countries outside of Saudi Arabia that may have helped in this massacre to be carried out.
Right. He definitely said that the international community is not going to be satisfied with the arrest and prosecution only of these 18 people, possibly hinting that this goes much higher up, obviously. But he also said that trials of these people should be held in Istanbul. Among other things that he said, that he had also spoken to President Donald Trump, who had said that all the issues pertaining to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi must be clarified in the public domain. What did he mean by that?
Well, we have been. First of all, we have to realize that in the first couple of days, from the Washington D.C., from President Trump, there was almost no response to this issue. Afterwards, he started picking it up as the rest of the Western world started picking it up, as Turkey put pressure with possibly more and more evidences that we put out. I think Mr. President Erdogan may see that U.S. or especially not, I shouldn't say the U.S., but President Trump should be more helpful in bringing the truth out, as opposed to how he has acted so far, which was somewhat forceful, statements, somewhat forceful willingness to to solve the case. I think President Erdogan may see President Trump as somewhat of a hurdle to overcome, to be able to clarify and bring this massacre out in the daylight.
Onur, stay with us. We're also joined by Parvez Alam, senior journalist from London. Now, as Onur was pointing out there, that, I think that he thinks that the Turkish president expects, America to do more under Donald Trump, and that he's sort of been a hurdle in this investigation, trying to, in certain ways, support the Saudi Arabians. What is your thought? Because the rest of the world, including the Germans, the French, and of course the Brits also, have been focusing on this every day and saying that justice must be done here.
Well, there's a lot of concern here in London, and the British government somehow is feeling that President Trump of the United States of America has not been forthcoming on this issue, the issue of Jamal Khashoggi's death, or rather murder, at the consulate in Istanbul. And that's why, as you said in your piece just now, that France, Germany and Britain have come together, and actually they had issued a separate statement, putting a lot of pressure on the American system as well, that this matter needs to be investigated. Now, President Erdogan, addressing the parliament in Ankara, said something very important, that those 18 people who are suspected of involving themselves in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi have to be tried on the soil in Turkey and in Istanbul. And that's a very important step that he has announced. The second thing is that he was trying to be also very diplomatic when he suggested that he was having detailed conversations with President Trump and also King of Saudi Arabia. And yet he refrained from mentioning that tape, which has been talked about as the biggest piece of evidence, suggesting that the Turkish officials had recorded something that would throw light on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, that's an important point, and I would like to take that to Onur. What about that tape that we've been talking about in the public domain, that the Turkish government, of course, many claim has been leaking information to media houses? That certainly did not come up in the statement that the president made there to Parliament.
Again, everybody suspects the same thing, because there seems to be something very concrete in the hands of the Turkish government, Turkish police force, and what have you. You know what? I think, and I just feel, I have a feeling about this, that President Erdogan may have extended his last piece of courtesy to Saudi Arabia and possibly to the United States, to come clean with what happened there, or how it was carried out. Because the suspicion with everybody is that, yes, there's more than what we're seeing, because the way things developed. If you just look back in the last 20 days, the Saudi government almost said everything that they said, they reversed it. So there must be something that's forcing them to do this. And the first thing everybody comes to everybody's mind is there's a concrete evidence, like a audio tape or a videotape of what has happened. That is very likely so. If that is so, I would definitely understand President Erdogan not to reveal this, or try not to reveal this as much as possible to make it public with the rest of the world. He would probably like for Saudi Arabia to clean up its own mess, and I think this may be the last public courtesy that he has extended to Saudi Arabia, and possibly to the United States, to clear up the matter. Or he will have to do what we all are thinking from the beginning, that there is some type of concrete evidence that he would not like to make public, if possible.
Okay, but when does that piece of information actually become public? Because as you were saying, Onur, that there has been so much speculation in this mysterious death. There was a speculation of that iPhone, iWatch, and then, stories have been there in the media all along. So there's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of real concern. What is the next logical step in this investigation?
I think Saudi Arabia has to take it to the next level. Listen, nobody will rest unless this is linked to one of the higher members of the Saud family, because we all know, though most of us would like not to talk about, we all know that this would have not been carried out without a very high order from the Saud family. Now, whether that be the MBS, somebody else, the king himself, we don't know, but we do know that the order came from someone very high in the ladder of the politics, in the ladder of the family there, and I think that's what's being pushed right now.
Okay, and Pervez Alam, do you agree with what Onur Rahim is saying there, that the Turkish government is not going to fall short here in pushing the boundaries of this investigation, even though, as you were pointing out yourself, that Erdogan actually fell short of in any way sort of implicating or blaming the king or the crown prince themselves?
Well, there are some complications involved here. The Turkish president was very careful to suggest that, look, everything was being done according to the Geneva Convention, according to the United Nations Protocol on diplomatic immunity, etc., all those things. Now, the moment he comes up with some of those details, including an existence of a tape, having the recording of Jamal Khashoggi's murder and the conversations, etc., then that's a very difficult path to really tread on, because then how come that the Turkish intelligence officials were recording some of those things? And as we understand, the consulate is the sovereign territory of Saudi Arabia according to all protocols. So he was very careful not to really mention tapes, etc. In fact, he is putting a lot of burden and pressure on Saudi officials to come clean. And the moment they come clean and the moment they say something which is not acceptable or which is not really a part of the factual investigation of the Turkish officials, then the Turkish officials will be coming forward and saying that, look, we have got a tape as well. I understand that this has been very carefully crafted by the Turkish president, the way he addressed the parliamentarians. He did not come up with all that evidence which has been mentioned in the media, but the fact is that some of that evidence has been leaked out by the Turkish officials. So there are two positions. A, the Turkish president is saying that diplomatic immunity is fine, but the murder has been committed on the soil of Turkey. So those people involved, 18 particularly, have to be tried on the Turkish soil. Second thing, he is not coming up with all those details, how the investigation was done by the Turkish officials, how the recordings were obtained by the Turkish officials, because there's a lot of sensitivity involved there.
Yeah.
That perhaps the Turkish officials were also breaching the conventions laid down by the diplomatic protocol.
Yes, absolutely, Pervez Alam. Extremely important point there, that the counter to that from the Saudis could be that, were you actually snooping inside our embassy? And only that could be a real problem for the Turkish side. Even if they do have the evidence, where is that evidence actually coming from?
That's true. And the second thing is that he is putting pressure on the Saudi officials. For example, the moment he said that where is this third party, the collaborator in Turkey?
Yes, I just wanted to take that to Onur. Do you want to respond to that? Where is that tape coming from? Is it part of the evidence because, the Turkish have been snooping on the Saudis inside the consulate?
I mean, again, there's a couple of theories that went around about this. One was that the Turkey or a part of the Turkish government was listening into it. There was a theory about with the eye watch of late Mr. Khashoggi. I mean, it could be a number of things, but let's not forget it won't be the first time if this thing had happened, and it probably won't be the last time. Let's all remember what happened a couple of years back between the United States and Germans or Germany. So unfortunately, things that are not supposed to happen do happen. But if anybody's gonna reveal something like this, I think the end will justify the means when it comes to a massacred human being, and a journalist especially. I think if it comes to that end, Erdogan is a person that always does what he says. If this doesn't come out, and if that is the case, which we don't know, he will go ahead. He won't hold back. That I know.
Okay, Onur Rahim and Pervez Alam, stay with us. We're just going to play out some of the key highlights from the Turkish president's speech.
First of all, starting from the day prior to the day of the murder, different planes were taken by a total of 15 Saudi safety, intelligence and forensics experts who came to our country. 6 of this team leave on October 2nd at 18:20. 7 of them leave on the same day at 22:50, taking private planes. And also another person who was given the impression or the look of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi with his outfit, with his glasses and the beard. This individual and the individual accompanying him also took a scheduled flight after midnight to Riyadh. This murder, yes, was indeed committed in the Saudi consular building, which is considered as Saudi soil. But one must not forget that that area is within the boundaries of the Republic of Turkey. Also, the Vienna Convention and other rules of international law do not allow the investigation of such a vicious murder to be prevented by resorting to the shield of diplomatic immunity. And of course, we will investigate this murder which was committed inside our country in all of its aspects. We will look into it and we will do whatever is necessary. On the other hand, of course, Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi national, but on top of that, he was a world-renowned journalist. And this, of course, gives us an international responsibility.
And Parvez Alam, you know, that point that the Turkish president was making there, that you are not protected under the Vienna Convention as far as your consulate is concerned in Istanbul or in Turkey rather, because a murder is a murder at the end of the day. What do you think the long-term repercussions, if any, for Saudi Arabia and the relationship between Turkey and the Saudi Arabian government?
I think that President Erdogan was quite restrained in his speech. I mean, one expected a lot, really, coming up with all those details and evidence, how Jamal Khashoggi's body was dismembered, because we have been reading about that and coming through the Turkish media. So he was quite restrained, and I understand that the Turkish president would like to have a kind of a final say on this matter. Let the Saudi officials come up with some details, and then if there's an opportunity for Turkey officials to contradict them, they would do so accordingly. So they are waiting for the Saudi official. They are putting a lot of pressure on the Saudi officials, number one. Second thing is that, look, Turkish, are known for putting a lot of pressure on journalists who are working in Turkey. So let's also accept that this is not the first time that the journalist has disappeared in Turkey. In fact, there are lots of journalists in Turkey, and there are Turkish journalists who are in the prison because President Erdogan himself is seen to be very dictatorial. So he has to restrain himself, and he is also trying to be diplomatic. That's why he was quoting Vienna Convention. But at the same time, the fact is the mediator, and at the same time, a very powerful mediator in this contest. And the Americans now have to come up with some of the details, because they have also sent their team. For the first time, we are hearing that the CIA director is in Turkey and things are happening. So Turkey, because is also an ally of the United States of America, is a very key player in the NATO agreement. So Turkish has to play its cards very carefully.
Right. And that brings me to the question, of course, that, the President Erdogan also hasn't been a keeper of international law in many ways, what the international community feels. But having said that, of course, the CIA team is there, led by the CIA chief, Gina Haspel. And I just want to make a personal comment here that Gina Haspel also has been a very controversial figure when it comes to keeping international laws. We know her, some of her interrogation methods in 9/11 were questioned. Having said that, what is the possibility of sort of this joint inspection bringing about, which has the mandate of the Americans as well?
Well, it's when I heard this I think it came out today with the CIA's involvement, I did not understand why they're getting involved at this hour, or why they're getting involved at all. Now, to a earlier comment that was made by your other guests with Turkey, with journalists and Erdogan, You have to realize. I know this is a preset. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this is a preset statement by most of the Westerners about Turkey and journalists. In Turkey, to be considered a journalist, you need to all you need to do is register yourself with the Turkish Journalists Association, and you get a card. So literally overnight, you could be officially in Turkey a journalist. The number that he was talking about, or the numbers that he was talking about, I think there's just about 150 people that hold journalist cards in Turkey who are in prison, and not one of them is in prison because of freedom of speech or their ability or their right to act as a journalist. Most of them are in jail due to terrorist activities, period. So please make that distinction. I am not saying that everything in Turkey, when it comes to courts, when it comes to journalists, or when it comes to freedom of speech, is perfect. But you know what? Neither it is in the rest of the world, in Western Europe, in the United States. So, let's get rid of this preset statement about Turkey, journalists, and Erdogan, because it is not true. Now, going back to this, again, I'm having very hard time to understand why CIA is getting involved at this time, or why CIA is getting involved at all. This has nothing to do with them, unless they think that they have something to do with this, which again raises the eyebrows that whether there are other countries involved in this mess. It's not a murder, it's a massacre. This guy was jumped on by 15 people. He was massacred, and possibly the disposal of the body was not a humane act either. We don't know the details yet. So, Mr. Erdogan, the President Erdogan was not restrained. He refrained himself.
Okay.
He refrained himself. He is trying to, I guess, with his own ideals, trying to make us as civil as possible, try to solve this as diplomatically as possible. There were a lot of voices.
Okay. Okay. Well, fair enough, Onur. I'm just trying to get my audio back. But if Pervez Alam can hear me, then then, the one, of course, big fallout for the Saudi Arabian government has been that the Davos in the desert, as it's called, the Saudi Investment Summit, has seen fewer big countries participating and fewer, big names participating. So it's been, in a sense, a setback for the Saudi Arabian government. And possibly the Crown Prince must have been watching this speech by the Turkish president very carefully this afternoon.
Obviously, he would be watching it. And the second thing is that the Crown Prince himself is not beyond any suspicion anymore. And the fact is, those people who came to Istanbul to clean up the job, and they were seen very close to the Crown Prince. Now, of course, the Crown Prince is trying to distance himself. And the bizarre thing for me is that he is the person who is monitoring this investigation. So, look, to be honest, the world is laughing. I don't know what Saudi officials have to say, but the fact is the man who is supposed to be in the dock, and that man is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is monitoring the investigation. That says a lot, because earlier we have already established through various media reports, and which has also been confirmed by the Saudi officials and the Turkish officials, that those people who came to Istanbul were high-ranking intelligence officials. They were sent by the government. Now they go rogue. All of them, they go rogue. They just act on their own. It's very difficult to convince the world. And let's not forget, a journalist of repute has been murdered, and has been murdered brutally. And there's a lot to answer in this regard. And I hope that there's a proper investigation, and all journalists all over the world are concerned. It's not a matter of a spat between Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And America has to see to it that the person who was working for the Washington Post as a columnist has been murdered. And so this is something very serious, a very serious crisis for all the parties.
Yes, and of course freedom of press is something that's under threat all over the world. But one of the statements that was made by the Turkish president was that this, of course, was whitewashing a heinous crime which will not do justice to humanity. So let's just listen into some more of his comments and get back to this.
The information and the evidence that we have so far collected indicate that Jamal Khashoggi was slain in a vicious, violent murder. Whitewashing such barbarity will, of course, injure and wound the conscience of all humanity. And we are, of course, looking forward to the same sensitivity being demonstrated by the administration of Saudi Arabia and all other parties to this affair. Dear friends, the Saudi Arabian administration took an important step by acknowledging and admitting the murder. And now our expectation from them going forward is that all those responsible from the highest degree, highest level to the lowest level will be highlighted, will be brought to justice, and will get the punishment they deserve. And there are indeed strong signs that the incident was not a momentary issue or a momentary result of something that erupted on site, but rather the result of a planned operation. And of course, in light of the existing information, the following questions still are relevant. So all 15 people who have backgrounds that are in one way or another connected to what happened or what was planned. Why was this team of people assembled in Istanbul on that day, on the day of the murder? Who gave the instruction to these individuals to come to Istanbul? We're looking for an answer to this question as well. Why was the consular premises not opened to examinations on that day or the following day, but many days later? We need an answer to this. Now, as it is now clear, of course, there was a murder, and it was clear from the beginning. Then why was there a slurry of incoherent statements? And now there is official acknowledgement that there was a murder. Where is the body? Why do we still not have the body? If the information that the body was given to a local cooperator, co-conspirator, and this is information by an authority, by the way. Now, my question is, who is this local co-conspirator?
And Onur, I'd like to take that question to you. Where is the body? Now, that is something really the Saudi Arabian government cannot possibly hoodwink the world community about for too long, because that is a question that's going to remain. Even if the investigation is closed, people are going to keep asking, well, yes, if he was murdered or, in a fist fight or whatever else that happened, as the Saudi Arabian government is saying, give us the real evidence here.
And rightfully so.
Yes.
Rightfully so. Listen, from day one, the Saudis have said a number of things, and they have reversed almost everything they said in the beginning. And now they, again, by the way, as President Erdogan underlined this statement was made by an official of the Saudi government. I believe it was their Minister of Foreign Affairs, that the body was handed over to a Turkish national, and he actually named it not named it, but said very specific. It was a Turkish national out of a certain province in Turkey called Mardin. But yet that was it. The name wasn't given, pictures weren't given, no other information was given. If you're coming at us, putting out an information like this, you give the rest, because obviously you have more information according to you. Nobody's forcing you, nobody's pressuring you to tell whatever you need to tell. You're coming out and saying this and then stopping it and not going forward. So you know what, from day one, the government of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has, I believe, not made one credible statement on the issue, except the fact that they accepted the killing of late Mr. Khashoggi, which is it is unbelievable. It's unheard of, for sure, unheard of. To be honest with you, if you ask me, I would not be surprised from this point on if they ended up blaming the whole thing on the Tooth Fairy. To be honest with you.
Okay.
Because
yeah.
It seems to be going.
Right. And Parvez Alam, the other point of view, of course, being that while the investigation was still in its initial stages, President Trump almost sort of preempted the entire investigation by saying that, yes, rogue killers were responsible for the death, sort of scripting what the Saudis were anyway going to say in the days to come.
That's true. President Trump initially was very supportive of the Saudi regime, and he has to, because he's the one who negotiated a number of agreements with the Saudi regime, the current regime, and including the Crown Prince. And there are suggestions that some of his family members are also involved in this business. Second thing is the most important from the American point of view. They're selling arms to Saudi officials. Billions and billions of dollars are involved, and he is on record to say, I'm talking about President Trump, that he would not like to see that jeopardized just because of this issue. So he was trying to be very supportive. But I think that during the last 4 or 5 days, Mr. Trump has distanced himself a little bit from his earlier position, that he was very supportive of the regime. Now he is saying that, well, investigation has to be completed and the American officials are also involved in this investigation, because this is too embarrassing for America and also too embarrassing for the Saudi allies. That's why this is very concerning for them. The second thing, from the Turkish point of view, just look at it. I think they are enjoying this, somehow game. When I say enjoying, means there is a kind of vicarious pleasure in a way that Turkish officials have pointed out again and again that how wrong the Saudi officials were. And indeed they were. So almost every day, Saudi officials come up with some sort of a statement, clarification, and the next day we see that that has been contradicted by the Turkish official and also by the international community, because that has not been the evidence so far. Like, for example, saying that the Jamal Khashoggi left the same day. Well, that's not true. That was such a badly enacted drama. Second thing, we see that there was a fist fight. There was somehow as if Jamal Khashoggi was involved in a kind of a fight with those investigators. That is not true, because you don't just, dismember the body. As far as we understand that the body was dismembered. So I think the Turkish officials are in a way enjoying this game that Saudi officials haven't planned anything, and every day they come up with a lie, and that has been seen by the rest of the world. So this is very bad for the Saudi officials and for their clarification so far. And Americans are also very embarrassed just because of this, because they are the strongest ally of the Saudi Arabia. And we also see that Israel and Saudi Arabia and America, they almost formed a kind of a triangle almost a year ago. And Iran was kicked out just because there is alliance. So there are some serious repercussions for Israelis, for the allies of Saudi Arabia, including America.
Yes, but what does that also say about, the experience of the Crown Prince? I mean, this entire botched up investigation or comments coming in every day just reflect how naive he may be in managing a situation like this, that the Turkish are coming out so much better off in this entire episode.
Well, better in a way, because to be honest, Saudi officials have been telling lies. That's it. And it's very difficult for them to, cover those lies. And they tried their level best, but then it was a kind of a botched up attempt on their part. So that's a problem for the Saudi officials. They have got huge amount of money and reserves of oil and etc. But then they still lack that sophistication which is needed at the international level to have alliances, and also to have the transparency. The transparency is not a part of the Saudi culture for a long, long time. During the last 50 years, 60 years or so, Saudi Arabian regime is seen to be one of the despotic ones, a very dictatorial regime, unfortunately, though things were looking good for some time during the last 2 years or so. But then now we understand that that was kind of a cosmetic, kind of a surgery, and that was apparently they were looking good. But in fact, the Saudi crown prince now finds himself involved in a very kind of a murky situation, and it's very difficult. It seems at this stage that he would come out of it clean. It seems really difficult.
Okay, but Raise Alam, the bigger question, of course, being what are the real implications of this going to be on Saudi Arabia, other than, of course, the immense, pressure and the spotlight being on this right now. But in terms of sort of real losses, we're looking at collaborations, cooperation that several countries do have with Saudi Arabia. It is an oil-rich country. Where is that going to change, if it was indeed going to change?
I think it's a very difficult situation, as I said earlier, for the allies of Saudi Arabia. And there are lots of, by the way, allies in the Western world. Let's not forget Britain. I'm speaking, here in London, and I know that Saudi officials and Saudi regime has always been very close to the British royalty, has always been very close to the British establishment, arms selling, dealing, etc. So that's one thing. So there are lots of allies in the Western world. Now, they are finding it very difficult. So it is hugely embarrassing for them as well. For example, now the Muslim world, now there are lots of Muslim countries, they receive donations from Saudi Arabia, including Pakistan. So it is very difficult for Pakistan as well. And for the rest of the world, including India, India would find it very difficult to actually criticize in very clear terms the Saudi regime, because they are depending on Saudi say charity in some way, that the oil dealings, and there are lots of Indians who work in Saudi Arabia. So it's a very, very difficult situation for the allies and the friends of Saudi Arabia. And unfortunately, Saudi Arabian officials and the current regime, they haven't made it easy for themselves.
Okay, Raise Alam, stay with us. We're just going to play out some more highlights of that address by the Turkish president to his parliament, and then come back to you.
First of all, starting from the day prior to the day of the murder, different planes were taken by a total of 15 Saudi safety, intelligence and forensics experts who came to our country. 6 of this team leave on October 2nd at 18:20. 7 of them leave on the same day at 22:50, taking private planes. And also another person who was given the impression or the look of Mr. Jamal Khashoggi, with his outfit, with his glasses and the beard. This individual and the individual accompanying him also took a scheduled flight after midnight to Riyadh. The information and the evidence that we have so far collected indicate that Jamal Khashoggi was slain in a vicious, violent murder. Whitewashing such barbarity will the conscience of all humanity. And we are, of course, looking forward to the same sensitivity being demonstrated by the administration of Saudi Arabia and all other parties to this affair. Dear friends, the Saudi Arabian administration took an important step by acknowledging and admitting the murder. And now our expectation from them going forward is that all those responsible, from the highest degree, highest level to the lowest level, will be highlighted, will be brought to justice, and will get the punishment they deserve. And there are indeed strong signs that the incident was not a momentary issue or a momentary result of something that erupted on site, but rather the result of a planned operation. And of course, in light of the existing information, the following questions still are relevant. this murder, yes, was indeed committed in the Saudi consular building, which is considered as Saudi soil. But one must not forget that that area is within the boundaries of the Republic of Turkey. Also, the Vienna Convention and other rules of international law do not allow the investigation of such a vicious murder to be prevented by resorting to the shield of diplomatic immunity. And of course, we will investigate this murder, which was committed inside our country in all of its aspects. We will look into it and we will do whatever is necessary. On the other hand, of course, Jamal Khashoggi was a Saudi national, but on top of that, he was a world-renowned journalist. And this, of course, gives us an international responsibility. So all 15 people who have backgrounds that are in one way or another connected to what happened or what was planned. Why was this team of people assembled in Istanbul on that day, on the day of the murder? Who gave the instruction to these individuals to come to Istanbul? We're looking for an answer to this question as well. Why was the consular premises not opened to examinations on that day or the following day, but many days later? We need an answer to this. Now, as it is now clear, of course, there was a murder, and it was clear from the beginning. Then why was there a slurry of incoherent statements? And now there is official acknowledgement that there was a murder. Where is the body? Why do we still not have the body? If the information that the body was given to a local cooperator, co-conspirator, and this is information by an authority, by the way. Now, my question is, who is this local co-conspirator?
All right, and Parvez Alam, senior journalist from London, is still with us. Parvez Alam, your final thoughts before we wrap up the show on your expectations of where this is headed going forward.
Well, now I'm going to point out something new in this interview. And this is that, look, there is a kind of a battle going on in the Muslim world to make sure who the leader is. Now, there are three key players at this stage. And Saudi Arabia has always been there because it's the custodian of two holy mosques, and because of Kaaba, and millions of people go there, and so that's one thing. Second thing is that Iran has always positioned itself as the alternate, kind of a leadership, being the pillar of that alternate Muslim politics. Number three, now Turkey has never seen itself as a kind of a Muslim leader in the international world, but with the election of Erdogan, who is seen to be a conservative person, who is also considered to be a bit dictatorial, and who is considered to be much more Islamist in the Turkish sense, because earlier there were the policies of Kemal Atatürk, who was considered to be a very, very secular, westernized kind of leader. So Erdogan is different from that. Now, Turkey has positioned itself and is offering, I think, as the new leader of the Muslim world. So this has to also be, seen in this context, that now Turkey is putting a lot of pressure on Saudi Arabia. Finally, I would say that let's not forget that until 1922 and 1924, when Kemal Atatürk took over, Turkey was the custodian of those holy mosques in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
They were given to Saudi Arabia later.
Yeah.
So now perhaps Turkey would like to regain that position. So that's another political thing that is happening.
Yes, absolutely. We will be seeing how this unfolds politically, geopolitically, and of course, as far as the investigation is concerned in the days to come. But that big statement coming from the Turkish President Recep Erdogan today, who was addressing the Turkish parliament this afternoon. And of course, all eyes were on that speech that he gave. I'm pretty sure the Saudi Arabian government, as well as the Americans, were watching that statement very, very closely.